we're starting somewhat of a different paradigm here, talking about cell biology, because most of the time we have been talking about a cell gets this signal and it does this thing, like the cell is on its own. Or possibly one neuron cell signals one muscle cell, and that muscle cell contracts on its own. But especially if we're interested in learning about the human body or complex behavior or any kind of higher organism, cells are in tissues and they work together. They literally stick together, they work together. So we're going to be focusing more on group behavior of cells and behavior of cells in tissues. Those of you that have had histology are already going to know this. But I'm also going to go through it quickly. So the best of both worlds, maybe. So cells are organized into tissues, and all of our tissues have some kind of embedding medium, or the stuff in between, or the supporting material called the extracellular matrix. So the most famous example is that in bone, this is a picture of bone at the microscopic level. The cells are actually really few and far between. So they're at the center of these concentric rings of extracellular matrix, which is calcium compounds. So in bone, the extracellular matrix is solid. In connective tissue, it's various levels of squishiness. In what's the extracellular matrix of blood? This is a tricky one. Plasma, which doesn't really seem right, but that's what it is, plasma. So any kind of extracellular matrix, including plasma, has some kind of possibility of having fibers in it to strengthen it. So in plasma, it's possible to have clotting fibers forming at certain times to strengthen the extracellular matrix. But in connective tissue, the fibers are really numerous. They help to provide the strength. And the most dominant one in the body is collagen. So this is showing you, generally, extracellular matrix that could be underlying the skin. So you've got epithelium, you've got dermis underneath, which is largely connective tissue. And here's the cell. So in all of this space, here's the cell. This is a fibroblast in the skin. Somebody today has a presentation about turning fibroblasts into something else. I won't say much more than that. But this fibroblast, its normal job is to secrete fibers. That's why it's named that. And it's secreting and creating collagen fibers that are in a crisscross network. So here are the ones that are running longitudinally, here, 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 here. And these little dots here and here are collagen fibers sliced through, and they're running in this direction. So the whole thing together strengthens the extracellular matrix. Collagen fibers are bigger, much bigger. Look how big this is compared to the cell. But their structural makeup is most similar to intermediate filaments. You have a long, extended polypeptide. They wrap around each other. They pack into fibrils. They're just much bigger. And it holds your skin. Part of what it does is it strengthens the support network for your skin. And when you get older, your collagen breaks down and you get wrinkles, which is not really a problem. My parents still do this. My mom does this. When I was younger, she would, not in a mean way, but she would like pinch the back of my hand like that. And she would say something like, your skin is like medium stretchy, but your dad, oh my goodness, your dad, not to this level, but he has really stretchy skin. But hers is so tight because of the structure of the connections in her connective tissue. And if you see her, she looks really young. She looks really young because of her supporting structure. My dad looks about the age that he is. This gentleman, this is a picture, I think, from a circus act, is that right? This guy used to travel around the circuses, and they called him like Elasto Man or something, because his skin was barely attached to the underlying tissues. It's attached, but barely, very stretchable. And what makes the difference between having very stretchable skin like this versus medium versus super tight depends on connecting the extracellular matrix, which is out here, so you might write that in this space. Out here, this is extracellular matrix. Here's one of those enormous collagen fibrils running through. And the way that this helps support is by physically linking to the cytoskeleton of cells. You've got a physical linkage here. So what I'm writing off to the side is there is a physical linkage between the extracellular fibers and the cytoskeleton of this cell down here. Physical linkage. And that linkage has to be provided by having proteins span the plasma membrane. You gotta span the plasma membrane, have connection to strengthening structures inside, like the actin cortex is what this is showing. There are some adapter proteins. There are spanning proteins called integrin, like they're integrated into the membrane, or they provide structural integrity. Those are connected to fibronectin. Those are connected to collagen. So this linkage, how many you have of them, how strong they are, that's what determines, in part, how well is your skin connected to connective tissue. So this gentleman would have weaker linkages, stretchier skin, than people who had more of these linkages. Their skin would work together better as a deep unit, so tying the layers together. So when you see fibronectin, integrin, those are linkers, those are structural linker proteins to link to extracellular matrix. So the extracellular matrix provides strength. So strength via the connections. Let's say tensile strength. So tensile is when you try to pull, right? Tensile strength is resistance against pulling force. It also provides compressive strength to tissues, where if you push on them, they resist a pushing force. And one tissue that does this particularly well is cartilage. Those of you that have had or are in comparative anatomy right now, if you think about what the cartilage looks like, it's shiny, it's white, it's rubbery. Push on it, and it will push back. It may even spring back, depending on what its fiber to water ratio is. But connective tissues also provide compressive strength, mostly by binding water and being very hydrated. So in this view, this is looking at part of the fiber network of cartilage. In this case, these fibers are here to hold water. So if you look at what are the components of these, there are some proteins, but then all of these red things have sugar bases. Sugar, sticky, that binds water. So all of this together binds and holds water to such a degree that you get compressive strength strengthening the extracellular matrix because it's binding and holding water so well. So if we look in the body, how are tissues arranged and what are the different tissue types? There's epithelial. Those are the lining tissues. Those cells need to be bound tightly together to provide a smooth, continuous surface in all different places. There's connective tissue. There's muscle tissue, and then what's the fourth? Nervous, or neuronal tissue. Those are the four major types. So wherever you have epithelial cell sheets, you usually have connective tissue right under it, in most cases. They're associated together because the epithelium by itself is wimpy.
I'm just talking to myself.
That's fine. Talk louder so I can hear you. There's usually connective tissue under, supporting, near the epithelial tissue. Because epithelial tissues are generally thin and weak on their own. They need the support of connective tissue. We've already gone through these terms before, but it's been a while. So when we talked about gut lining and the gut epithelium, and we've got to get glucose from here to here, we talked about the concept of apical. That's like the free surface. So next to the air, or next to a lumen, or next to not another cell. That's apical. Basal is going to be the one that's near the connective tissue. And the region down here where they are literally connected, that's called basal lamina. Basal lamina. There is polarity. There are certain proteins that might be present here that are not down here, like we talked about before. Make a note that I want you to make a couple of notes about epithelial tissues here. Epithelia would be the plural. Epithelia have certain characteristics. They divide pretty often because whatever this cell sheet is lining, there's usually substances passing by, or there's some kind of friction, so that epithelia often get damaged and they need to replenish their cells. So these would be going through the cell cycle more frequently than other cells in the body. Epithelia divide often. And to function correctly, epithelial cells, they literally need to stay in line. They need to stay in line. They need to stay with each other, connected to each other, in a flat sheet to do their purpose. We're going to see later that cancer cells often arise from epithelia that are dividing too often and also getting out of bounds. They go up, they might divide and push up, like with skin cancer that comes up in a bump. Sometimes they divide and dive in or go deep, like invasive ductal carcinoma of the breast. It's coming from an epithelium. The cells are dividing too often. They are not staying in line. They're going up or down, and they might become invasive in that case. We'll talk about that more in the next lecture. So for epithelial cells especially, they've got to stay in line. They've got to stay joined to each other. They've got to have the right configuration. And they have various ways of being linked together, and those linkages have different purposes. This stuff on the final is going to be multiple choice based questions, but there are questions about it, about these different types of junctions. And you've got a nice study chart here to review those. But I'm going to start at the top with talking about the tight junctions. That's the one that we saw in the gut. We've already talked about those some. Those prevent leakage of substances between cells. Nothing can get through here. Nothing can leak from lumen downward. And these also are diffusion barriers for other proteins that could be drifting along in the membrane. Those are tight junctions. These next two are strengthening junctions. They have that in common. So they are linking neighboring cells together by having integral membrane proteins so that this cell is physically connected to this cell, and they're connecting to the cytoskeleton. These are strengthening, linking junctions. Adherens junctions. Adherens, A with A, those are linking actin cytoskeletons. Let's connect this cell's actin cortex to this cell's actin cortex. That's an adherens junction. A desmosome is the same concept, but is linking intermediate filament networks. Which one of those would probably be more stable? The desmosomes, because the intermediate filaments themselves are more stable. Both of these help bind epithelia into a sheet. When we saw the epidermolysis bullosa disease, where the child didn't have enough plectins, those would be affecting these junctions. Intermediate filaments connecting to other filaments. There's actually these two within a cell, actually, connecting these two within a cell. Those are adherens junctions and desmosomes. Those connect neighbors. Gap junctions also connect neighbors, but their purpose is not strengthening, it's information. These are for information sharing. If you're in plant biology, these are similar in concept to plasmodesmata. Small molecules can pass from this cell to this cell if they're small enough and can fit through there. So they allow information sharing. And there's a physical gap in between there. And then our last linking structure is hemidesmosome. It's a desmosome again, but it's linking two different type of structures together instead of two of the same. So it's linking still intermediate filaments with extracellular fibers. That's hemidesmosome. If we go back and look at this picture, would this be part of regular desmosome, adherens junction, or hemidesmosome? This is most likely to be probably a hemidesmosome because it's connecting to collagen on the outside. It is connecting to actin on the inside though, but it's most similar to hemidesmosome. It's not cell to cell, it's cell to fiber. So cell to fiber, cell to cell, cell to cell, cell to cell as a barrier, cell to cell as an information channel. So know the difference between those and generally what they do. Not every cell in your body has all of these, by the way. Not every cell in your body would have every one of these junctions. Depends on where it is and what its function is. Tight junctions, we have already, I think, said enough about those in this class previously. Some years I did not do as much with gut epithelia, but tight junctions are working properly, what's passing through the lumen of your gut will not get deeper. If you have inflammatory bowel disease, part of what causes your problems is these do not work properly for various reasons. Either your epithelium is damaged in the first place, but you can have gut contents getting too low. If this happens in the stomach, woo, what do you have to worry about here? If this is the stomach lumen, what do you not want leaking down? Acid. That's why ulcers hurt. Tight junctions are really important for barriers. Here are some 3D examples of the other junctions. So remember, you've got an actin cortex that's extensive, crisscrossed, goes deep within the cell. And those adherens junctions are linking all of these together, and that provides a lot of support going through any epithelium. That's what it would look like in 3D. Here is an actual electron micrograph of a desmosome. Look how well they did with the cartoon. Very good job depicting. Here's the strengthening components. You can see a few in between molecules depicted in the green here, and then you've got intermediate filament networks coming out from there. Any of you have coats where you've got a button that faces out, and then you've got a button on the inside to keep it from ripping? It's a lot like this. Seems to be only girls' coats have this. I asked Juan, he's like, no, I've never seen that. Girls' coats do. Closer up picture of gap junctions. The membranes of the neighboring cells are a little bit closer together at a gap junction. And if you look at them from top on, they have a six-fold symmetry, and they are literal channels that are connecting this cytoplasm with this cytoplasm. That's all I'm going to say about them here, though. Let's have a break. Right now there is coffee, and we will have some more